You can spend thousands on a drone, but if the radio link fails, none of that matters. In part four of our 7-part series, we're breaking down the RC transmitter and receivers, what really matters, what's marketing fluff, and how to pick a combo that you can actually trust in the air. If you've ever wondered what TX, RX, SBus, CRSF, or ELRS actually means, this episode's for you. I'm Joshua Hill, and this is the Swarm News, where veterans and engineers talk about defensive tech the way that it actually works, not the way that it looks in some briefing. And here with me, co-host who has some sUAS updates for us.
And thanks, Josh. I'm Vincent Lewis. And before we get started, I'm going to go over a little bit of the news that's going on with the military side and also on the civilian side. One of the things that we have is on NATO, they have first call off order for orders for under a framework agreement with Parrot for a NAFI UKR micro UAV systems. They're basically picking up a couple of thousand of those here soon, but their initial batch is going to be a couple hundreds with the potential to scale into thousands across NATO nations. This gives member states a fast catalog style of procurement path for standardizing small sUAS while still aligning with their own national processes and requirements. The first publicity named customers with Finland Defense Forces was joined by a second undisclosed defense customer that will announce later, signaling growing adaptation of common sUAS across the alliance and NATO. These frames are going to be a proof of point for multinational interoperability, which makes it easier for many of them to come across with the nations being able to be on the same path with similar aircraft and being able to field a compatible drone with the same tactics and tactical edge that they would all have in common. The NAFI UKR is a sub 1 kilogram tactical micro UAV designed for secure operations to contest environments with embedded AI, optical navigation, and full offline autonomy to keep it flying in GSS denied or jammed conditions, which is pretty good for a small sUAS like that. So, Period highlights hardened cybersecurity, data sovereignty, and resilience to electronic warfare, and leveraging its Mars military radio and advanced auto our anti-spoofing and frequency hopping capabilities, which that's going to be significant, especially for something that small. If you don't know what the Paranafis are, you should go look them up. They're pretty cool, and they actually have a lot of capability to be as small as they are. Another one on the sUAS side for military, Croatian company by the name of Orca has signed a team agreement with the U.S. Army's Red River Army Depot in Texarkana, Texas, to expand small sUAS manufacturing for U.S. forces. The deal is designed to build organic Army production capacity for small drones instead of relying solely on primes or foreign suppliers, aligning with U.S. military and NDA driven domestic sourcing priorities. Red River will produce Orca platforms for U.S. military customers and potential allied nations, signaling a shift towards depot based scalable manufacturing of obtainable sUAS. Then UK firm by the name of Skycutter in partnership with Ukraine company Skyfall won the Pentagon's first dominance program with the Shrike 10 fiber FPV drone, scoring a 99.3 point basically almost out of 100 and outperforming more than 2 dozen competitors as the top finisher. Skycutter is slated for a international or initial order of about 2,500 drones and gains a strong position for follow-up buys in the remaining three gauntlets, which is pretty good in that case for them to get that many in that short a time. Then results for Pentagon rapidly adapting combat-proven Ukraine FPV concepts and favoring agile platforms over traditional higher cost is certain mission, setups. On the civilian side, Safer Skies enacted in late 2025 as part of the FY 2026 NDA is now moving into implementation, extending legal counter UAS and authority beyond few federal agencies to qualify state, local, and tribal territorial law enforcement bodies. The agencies that seek this authority must undergo federal training, adhere to strict reporting requirements, and use only approved detection and mitigation technologies vetted through a central federal process to basically say they got the right equipment to be able to identify specific drones or drones, period. And this framework is effectively standing up a standardized nationwide model for lawful detection and, in some circumstances, disruption of threatening drones near critical infrastructure and public events. So that's going to be a significant situation where now the law enforcement areas can actually go in, get counter UAS systems, use those systems to knock out aircraft that are in the sky, and then evaluate if there's something that needs to be done in regards to legalities of the system. And that's going to make a big change in regards to how law enforcement municipalities are going to have to work to basically get drones that are not supposed to be up there out, which is good. There's a lot of things happening now that's legally being done. So if you're flying out and you're doing something wrong, know that your time's coming short. You can make it simple as that. With that being said, that's all for the news for this week. Also, before I go, want to say thank you to everybody. We just hit over 100 followers. We're at 135 as of today. Thank you for everybody that has subscribed and followed us on YouTube and even on podcasts in regards to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, wherever you are listening. We thank you for following us and helping us to get to a milestone of over 100. So again, thank you. And if you haven't followed, like to subscribe, we appreciate it if you do. And take this opportunity to do that now. Appreciate you. Back to you, Josh.
Yeah. I want to appreciate you guys. We thank you for what you're doing. And this is episode 18. And this is part 4 of our 7-part beginner to pro series on building a reliable drone system. So far, we've talked about airframes, we've talked about your power systems and flight controllers and autopilot. So what else are we going to be talking about today? What lead us into this, Vince?
So today we're going to be talking about the voice of the whole rig. Basically the RC transmitter and the receiver, the thing that literally connects your brain of the aircraft to the rest of the aircraft.
Okay. So today I'm going to be playing the role of person who's just plain curious about how these things work. Okay. And maybe a little confused, as myself, and still learning some of these things on the inner workings of these systems. And Vince is going to unpack all the details for us from an engineer's point of view so that we actually understand and we all have a better knowledge of the SU and how they actually function. So, all right, let's start at the beginning, as we always do. When people hear TX and RX, what are we really talking about in the drone world?
So, to kind of keep it simple, initially TX means transmit. And in the case of your sUAS, your transmitter is the thing that actually puts out the signal that connects to your aircraft. In this case, transmitter is your radio in your hands. RX is the receiver, or it is what's receiving the information that's being transmitted to it and or sending it also back. So typically this is a dual way or dual communication. So basically, as one thing is getting sent, is being something sent back. And in some cases where the transmitter is just sending something to the receiver gets it and it just takes it. With what we'll talk about a little bit further in, we'll be talking about why or how that works. So keep it a little bit more simple. RX is the receiver. It's the little board or the little small component that's on the aircraft that's just listening. When you move a stick or flick a switch, that's coming from your transmitter. Transmitter turns into a digital signal and blasts it into a radio frequency, which then the receiver hears it, decodes it, and hands the commands off to your flight controller ESCs.
Okay. So the chain is basically the transmitter to the radio link to the receiver to the flight controller, and then the motors and control surfaces.
Exactly. And if anything, any part of the chain is noisy, and poorly configured or is out of spec, you feel the latency, you'll hear the twitchiness, or you'll feel the twitchiness. Even though you don't physically feel it, you'll notice it when you're flying. And in worst case, you'll have a fail-safe when any of this stuff isn't working, which means that you're possibly going to crash if you don't have it set it up properly.
Okay. And what about the actual frequencies that we're using here? Like, I'm always hearing like the 2.4 and the 900 something megahertz.
Yeah. So most transmitters are working on 2.4, and then another one is 5.8, but those are typically on your transmitter, not on your transmitter, on your video, which we'll talk about that in another episode. So for the range to penetrate through trees and buildings and terrain, these are the signals that you're pretty much using: 2.4 and 900.
Okay. So when I go shopping for a radio, the first spec I see is channels. 6 channel, 8 channel, 16 channel. What is this telling me? What does this mean for a pilot?
So each channel is basically one control signal, and a simple plane or a quad might use 4. So pitch, roll, and yaw. For a plane, it needs it. Quad kind of needs a little bit more. As you add flight modes, gimbal, lights, payload release, you'll be using 8, 10, 12, maybe more in channels without trying, even thinking about it really. But in the case of each one of those components, typically to get it to do something, you need one more channel, or you need the channels to do it.
Okay.
And for the most FPV and general drone work, you're going to be under, basically 8 channels. For commercial features such as gimbals, actually added payloads, lights, and things like that, you're going to be working pretty much with about 12 to 16 channels. It gives you enough room kind of to grow. So if you have a transmitter that you're needing just for basic operations, 6-channel transmitter will work. For if you want to do a little bit more and to be safe, so you don't have to worry about buying another one, you want 12 to 16 channels, which you'll pretty much want to have.
Okay, that's good information to have. So when we're listening to the racers talk about latency and link fill, or a lot of, for someone who's not racing, like how much does latency matter?
So latency, first off, is how long it takes your stick movement to show up at the flight controller. If you're racing and flying tight proximity, 10 milliseconds end to end locks it, feels like it's locked in to a point. But if you can get it quicker, you're good. The quicker you can get it to respond, the faster you can make movements. And it may not seem like it's fast, but when you look at it, for those who play video games, you're on your sticks and your response from your controller to TV is enough to where if you're not moving quick enough, that could mean you're getting shot and dead. And if you're in a flight, say with a race, that lag in it and the latency is enough to where if you're trying to make that quick tight turn, could cause you to basically run into the pole or not make it in. So the faster it is, the better it is. So anything above 20 to 30 milliseconds, the aircraft starts to feel a little bit, mushy or behind in your hands. So you basically want it to be a little bit quicker in the response time, depending on your response of what you're needing the aircraft to do. Flight, like say a camera rig, doesn't have to have it super fast, but if you're flying a race drone, you want it to be quick.
So if your drone feels slow, it might not be your flying, it may be a latency issue that you're experiencing. Is that
correct? And the way you can kind of tell how your latency is to kind of give you a reference is put it in front of you, put it up, and just see how quick it spins. As if you give it a left stick, it hesitates and goes, you can kind of tell that's a little bit slower than you want. Then you have to ideally, maybe it's your PIDs, maybe it's the latency from the transmitter, but typically your transmitter is not that fast. They're not that slow. You won't even notice it enough really until you're really in a pickle of a situation where you got to literally know you're moving fast. Normally It's not bad.
So talk to me about this alphabet soup that I was talking about earlier in the intro. Like, what is PWM, PPM, SBus, CRSF, ELRS? I mean, what does all this mean? What's the breakdown?
So they're all pretty much your different protocols. Like we were talking about last week with PWM, it's your old school 1 wire per channel. It works. It's bulky, more prone to noise. Basically, it's just a up and down signal, pretty much just getting it in. PPM puts the channels in 1 wire. It's cleaner, but it's still analog. Then you have your modern flight controllers, like a digital serial protocols like iBus, CRSF. They're all 1 wire, lots of channels, and low latency. So serial bus is one of the most common. Back when I was flying FR Sky, SBus was what we were using. You're getting all 16 channels down through that single point on your transmitter. You have to have each line hooked into the flight controller, which made life a lot easier. And then you have one that's at the top right now, and it's pretty much got the ecosystem pretty much dominated at the moment, which is ELRS, which is a version of Crossfire or Ghost. In this case, more so Crossfire. ELRS basically gives you all the protocols in a faster, more convenient method. So you can get your, say, if you're in the case, if you're using Mission Planner, you can reduce the amount of components you need because ELRS is capable of allowing you to remove the RFD 900 from a typical ArduPilot build and allow you to put all your signals upload and download through that one receiver, which means a significant change in what you may want to build. Because now instead of having to have, say, an S bus and the S bus receiver just to do your telemetry to the transmitter, allows you to have one receiver to do all the things that you would typically have in two.
So practically what I'm hearing, I'm picking an ecosystem and that's the living in, and then I'm living in that world. Like that's just what I deal with.
Yeah, and you can change back and forth. That's the cool part about it. But typically when you pick a transmitter, you're pretty much buying yourself into that one because you're not going to typically want to go between, say, in this case, Spectrum, which could be running S bus, or going backwards to, not even going backwards, I guess you can say you're typically using the transmitter with their protocols, and you're not going to want to cross over to say go from Spectrum to a Crossfire, or in this case TBS transmitter, or Radio Master, which is using their protocol ELRS. Then you have Spectrum, which is using S bus still. So depending on what transmitters you want is dictating what you're going to kind of go with for your receiver.
So you mentioned receivers talking back. What kind of info can you actually get? I mean, in my opinion, if you're not using telemetry to make decisions, you're just watching your drone fail in real time.
Yeah, telemetry is the difference between landing safely or saying, I don't know what happened. And what telemetry is your battery voltage, your current, GPS, RSSI. You can set it up on voice callouts or haptic alerts. And telemetry isn't about what's happened, it's about preventing what's about to happen.
So let's save our viewers some time here and some pain. What are the biggest mistakes people tend to make with radios and receivers?
So, number one is not doing a range test. So, that's something you can do on the ground. You want to do a range test in the transmitter to make sure that your receiver is actually getting the link it needs and the connection it needs before you go out and fly the first time. Number two, antenna placement. That one can be difficult, but you want to put your antennas, especially if you have dual antennas, at least 90 to 45 degrees apart. If you have one, you want to put it in a direction to where if you're flying, and normally in a drone or in a quadcopter, the aircraft is flying like this. So you want it to be either up in a way where it can actually be seen so that no matter what position it's in, if it's, and say this aircraft, it leans, you can see it. If it's level, you can still see it and it can get a connection. Because at altitude, when you're flying, your antenna's back here, as you can see, you can't see it. And it's harder for it to see anything else through. So you want to make sure your antenna placement is in the proper way, and or that you have your antennas angled out in a way where they can be seen. So either 45, 90 degrees sitting on the aircraft like this, kind of backwards. The other one is don't bury it under the carbon. Like don't put your antenna in a place to where they're inside the carbon fiber of the frame. They need to be out and open. Granted, you have opportunity for them to get cut by the props, but if they're up and you reinforce them, they'll be good. The best radio in the world won't save you if you don't do just these simple things. Number three is ignoring your fail-safe. Set your aircraft up to have fail-safes. So either it goes into level hover flight if you lose it, or it goes into land mode. Have something to where it'll literally be, or in case if you have a drone that's set up with ArduPilot, RTL, simple return to land, or basically return to home, RTH, is a lifesaver and it saves you hundreds of dollars. That one,
Yeah, we've had that issue with our own development.
yeah, like some of them just, you don't set it up, it won't come back. And I've learned that through multiple opportunities when I was younger trying to figure this out. So I had one aircraft, a little short story. My very first drone took me 12 times to get it flying for the first time. And my actual time, I finally get it flying, and I'm put up, trying to get it direction, and it was going away from me further and further. I was like, oh, I got to cut it. And I cut it. And just so happened, it fell in a neighbor's yard, but I had a 4-way split and I didn't know whose yard it fell in. So I pretty much called it lost. But fortunately, one of my neighbors that I went to talk to him said that her husband just so happened he found it while he's cutting grass, and the actual drone survived. I was like surprised with it being powered on and everything. I was able to put a brand new battery on, and it was still working, even though it was like sitting in dew for like 4 days, but it worked. So I learned a lesson: don't set up your aircraft and go too far without knowing what you need to do and setting up your fail-safe. And yeah, we learned the hard way on a couple of these on our own, but we won't go into that right now.
Well, so I mean, that's our crash course in the RC transmitters and receivers.
Yeah. So, and also one of the things, if you build it, make sure that you do this the right way and keep you from worrying about brownouts. And one of the things we didn't talk about, a brownout, is basically when you're losing signal in the middle of your flying and constantly kind of going in and out of flight. So that's kind of an important part that you really need to know when you're flying. If you hear that terminology, the one thing that you can also do to help you out, climb. Give yourself some altitude, slow it down. And if you don't know what you're looking at, just come to a halt. You can put it in hover. And if you set up on your flight modes to be in hover, that's helping you immensely. Or altitude hold if you're using autopilot, because now it'll actually hold altitude and also stay in place. So you don't have to worry about trying to finagle the sticks as you're flying to keep it at altitude too. So that slow down on the aircraft movement, get a position, understanding where you are, and also knowing how to work the aircraft back to you and having your fail-safe set and knowing what to do if you have a brownout is a major part of you building your aircraft and using your transmitters properly.
Yeah, that's good information there, Vince. In part 5, we move into video links and FPV systems. So drop in your questions or any suggestions you have for future episodes that you'd like to see in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm Joshua Hill.
And I'm Vincent Lewis, and thank you. And we'll talk to you later.